They really did that to her. Hello loves, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to yet another history video. And for some reason today, I have decided to turn it super hard. In today's history topic, we are actually talking about the life of Lady Jane Grey. Now, if you've actually been here for a hot moment, I actually teased this video way back when, if you watched my Mysterious Case of Amy Robsart video. You know, the British lady who may or may not have died falling down the stairs. Because in that video, I briefly kind of explain the Battle of Secession that was happening on the Tudor line around the Henry VIII-ish type of era. And Lady Jane Grey was actually one of the most key figures of that. And today we are going to be talking about her life. Now, Miss Wendy, who is Miss Lady Jane Grey? Well, let me tell you. Lady Jane Grey was actually a Queen of England, believe it or not. She was the shortest queen. She only reigned for 9 days. Now, Lady Jane Grey was the eldest daughter of Henry Grey, who was the first Duke of Suffolk, and his wife, Frances Brandon, in 1537. Now, Jane's mother, Lady Frances, was actually the daughter of Mary Tudor. No, not Mary the First, not Bloody Mary, no. But Henry VIII's youngest sister, Mary. So, through her grandmother, Mary, Jane was actually directly linked to Henry VIII and the English crown. And because of that, her family was very much in royal court. She was in nobility. Diva had the best spawn point. She was like, oh, this is okay, great. If I'm here, That's great, lovely. Now, Jane's upbringing was actually super harsh and very strict, and was kind of common during that time. But she did receive a pretty decent education at home. Jane was actually a very smart girl. She actually was able to read and write both Greek and Latin at a very early age, and she also was able to learn and was super proficient in French, Italian, and Hebrew. In 1546, when Jane was only 9 years old, she was actually sent to go live off in the household of Queen Catherine Parr. And yes, Catherine Parr, as in the last wife of Henry VIII, the widow queen. She, in her house, they said, oh, Miss Jane, go live with her. Her daddy did want nothing to do with her, I guess. I don't know. Now, Catherine Parr, historically, was a very famous patron of the arts, and she kind of had those ideas and values instilled into her stepchildren, as well as with Lady Jane Grey when she lived with her. And so Jane actually became very cultured in art, music, scripture, Protestantisms of the time. And so Jane actually started to blossom into this very intelligent, super cultured, beautiful, pious, British girl. But unfortunately, Jane only really had Catherine's influence for about 3 years, because in 1548, Catherine Parr passed away. And Jane was actually made a lord of Catherine Parr's husband, Thomas Seymour, at the time, because she did get remarried. She remarried Thomas Seymour. Thomas Seymour then gained custody of Lady Jane Grey, who Thomas actually had planned to have Lady Jane Grey marry her cousin, Edward VI, as in the Boy King. Miss Diva was supposed to be queen anyway. She was going to be, the first pick of the draft. Okay. But anyway, Catherine Parr is dead. Fun fact, Lady Jane Grey was actually made chief mourner at Catherine Parr's funeral. Now you're probably asking, Miss Wendy, what is a chief mourner? Well, let me tell you. A chief mourner is somebody who actually leads the funeral procession and funerary processes and makes sure the deceased has their rights and everything done. And they made it Lady Jane Grey. Now, traditionally, chief mourners were actually a spouse or the eldest child of the deceased, or someone who is so intensely close with the deceased family that they're pretty much relative of blood. it goes to show that when Lady Jane Grey was made chief mourner, of how close she was to Catherine Parr at the end of her life, as well as with the family. And keep in mind, when this happened, Diva was like 12 or 13. 12 or 13, and she's, you know, she's so close with someone who is literally a queen. Like, whoa. But then, shortly after that happened, Thomas Seymour was actually beheaded by his brother for treason. Oh, okay. Super quick rundown of the Seymour brothers really fast, everyone. One actually marries Catherine Parr whenever Henry VIII dies, and the other one actually is made the regent and pseudo-king of the entire country for Edward VI, the boy king. Yeah. Anyway, there was a super crazy power struggle with that because Thomas, who was like marginally better than the other one, you know, his brother was flop Tina Aguilera-ing very bad, doing a horrid job running the country for this boy king, like doing kind of awful things. And Thomas, who was marginally like not as terrible as his brother, wanted to like be in Edward's favor to also not only like bargain him of like, hey, you know your cousin Lady Jane, she's super sweet, super nice, you guys would get along, I feel like, you know, she'd be queen, ooh. Like, trying to get Lady Jane Grey, who is like his ward and like practically legal daughter now, because I guess her bio dad is just somewhere, trying to actually advocate for her and like throw her up into higher, like, no, but like, oh, the highest thing that she can get to is queen, let me help her with that, because he believes in her. Like, really, honestly, a very, very good father figure to Lady Jane Grey. But anyway, Thomas Seymour, you know, Lady Jane Grey's like pseudo-dad, was beheaded by his brother, who is the basic like king of the country at the moment, for trying to like break into the castle at like night to like see and visit and talk with Edward. Yeah, he kiboshed him. Yeah, I'm like, your own brother, that's so crazy. Anyway, Thomas Seymour's dead. So Lady Jane is kind of just like, so she is sent back to this place called Bradgate to kind of finish out her studies and like, you know, finish, you know, all of her young woman like duties and things like that. Now, after the whole Thomas Seymour like treason thing, Jane's bio dad, Henry Grey, actually had to be like vetted by like the King's Council or whatever, like in case like he decides to do treason on like, you know, in lieu of his daughter was trying to be like, you know, what Thomas is like, he was trying to do was like catapult her into queen. They wanted to make sure that like Henry wasn't going to do that either. And so Henry Grey, who from what I read, kind of a bad, like not a great dude, like was kind of like not awesome to his daughters. Yeah. Because when he's being, like, interviewed for, like, the King Council of like, you know, vet him of, like, oh, he's good, like, whatever, he actually uses Lady Jane Grey as a bargaining chip to, like, buy these guys off of, like, oh, yeah, no, you want my daughter Jane as a wife? Here you go. Like, as a bargaining chip to get his butt off. Like, what? Ew. Hate that. Huge ick. But luckily, nothing actually ever came of that, and Jane wasn't, like, engaged off to one of these, like, councilmen's, like, sons or themselves. In 1553, very famously, King Edward, the boy king, actually fell ill with a fever and a cough that was, it ended up being extremely fatal to him. And that is when the entire, like, war of secession and battle for secession actually happens, because his regent, the bad Seymour, wanted the crown to stay Protestant, and his like oldest sister Mary very much wasn't. She was Catholic. She was, you know, Catherine of Aragon's daughter, very Catholic girly, Miss Catholic. Not only did the bad Seymour want the crown to be Protestant, he wanted it to be male because UK, yeah, sure. So he wanted it to be male and Protestant. Cool, 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 cool. The only options are actually Mary Tudor, who is super Catholic, Catherine of Aragon's daughter, or Elizabeth the First, who is there, and she's a lady. No, ma'am, absolutely not. So Edward VI actually took the advice of the bad Seymour to disinherit both of his half-sisters in favor of a male heir Protestant of his cousins, Lady Jane Grey and her 3 sisters. Now, unfortunately, Jane and her sisters didn't have any male kids, and like weren't having any yet. Like, you know, they need somebody to be next in line quick. So they kind of lasered in on, okay, well, who's the eldest? Whoever the eldest, you know, and that was Lady Jane Grey. And they had ruled that Lady Jane Grey, without her knowledge, you know, she didn't know any of this yet, they decided Lady Jane Grey was going to be queen when Edward dies, and like her line of children were going to be the next line of the crown. So flash forward just a little bit, because Edward has not passed away yet. He's still king. Lady Jane Grey was actually engaged and married when she was 15. 15. Okay. She was engaged to be married to Lord Guilford Dudley, who was the son of John Dudley, the first Duke of Northumberland. Who John Dudley was also the dad of Robert Dudley, who was Amy Robarts' husband. Time of disillusion. History is nothing consequential. Amy Robsart and Lady Jane Grey were sister-in-laws. I can't. Anyway, Lady Jane Grey is engaged to Guilford Dudley, who is the brother of Robert Dudley, who was married to Amy Robsart. Okay, so we're just in the history Twilight Zone. Got it. Okay, check. Lady Jane Grey actually gets married in a triple ceremony with her sister Catherine and her sister-in-law, Catherine. I guess somebody had a Groupon or like a BOGO deal. I don't know. But they had a triple ceremony of all 6 of them. Okay, cool, work. So after Edward actually passes away, Jane is actually called to her father-in-law's house in London, where she goes in and like there's heck of people in here, important people, and where like the King's Council and like Regent like explain to her, yeah, of the dead, you know, king's wishes, you are actually now Queen of England. And they all bowed to her. And Defa was like, what is happening? Jane was caught completely off guard, completely in shock, super surprised, and she started crashing out. She super stressed. She actually faints. She was stressing out. Mind you, Jane is like 16, 17. She's like, I'm queen. What are you? What? And me personally, I think the reason why Lady Jane Grey was so, like, in the moment, so taken off guard, so stressed, so just absolutely spiraling and crashing out, because I think she was realizing something. The 2 girls that she grew up around in Catherine Parr's house and in royal court, super, super close, Mary and Elizabeth, were both just disinherited from the crown and being in like their lives and like, oh, this is not good. Like, and I think Jane like immediately knew, oh, Mary's gonna be so mad at me. Like, being around these 2 girls who were pretty much like in the next in line of heirs, she was like, oh, I just found out like 2 very close, you know, girly friends of mine were just disinherited of the actual crown of England, and now it's given to me, their like cousin who was just there in their house. Yeah, I think she very adamantly was crashing out for a reason. So, per coronation tradition, Lady Jane Grey, who was about to be Queen Jane, went to the Tower of London, because that's where they did all the coronation things like that. Her and her little court, went to the Tower of London to do the ceremonies and things like that. Now, during this, Mr. Guilford, who, from what I can read, super mama's boy, like, in his mom, like, his mom was all up in Lady Jane Grey's business, things like that, super controlling of her kids, like, super mama's boy, like, mom, number one, Jane, kind of second. Guilford demanded to be made king consort immediately, and Jane did not feel super comfy, cozy of doing that. She's like, no, you're not going to be made king consort or any type of thing of that matter. I will make you a duke of this, but like, no, I don't feel comfy doing that, no. So Guilford was like, I don't want to be a duke, I want to be king. And she was like, okay, yeah, you definitely aren't doing that now. And Jane and him had a whole argument, but then Guilford's mommy, like, overhears and, like, hears about this argument, and then lashes out to her son of, like, I forbid you to sleep with your wife, which is such a weird ask, like, that's so crazy, like, this is naughty, you cannot sleep with her, like, that's such a weird, like, mommy type of thing, there's some type of issue going on there. She also told him, you need to leave the tower at once. You should not sleep with her and just go home. And then, like, Jane, like, talks to him and, like, because Jane is very smart and, like, pretty much the queen now and, like, very eloquent, she, like, convinces him to stay and, like, they make up a little bit. But just to quickly emphasize, her husband asked to be king, and then Jane was like, nah, bro. She's not even crowned. She's already being iconic. But then a couple of days after, we actually know what happens. Mary finds out, gets super mad, as Jane probably expected, and raises an army and basically instills herself as queen. And because of that, she throws Lady Jane in jail. I mean, they're already at jail. They're at the Tower of London. Throws her in the Tower of London. Now, while they were actually in jail and in prison, Jane was actually, like, allowed to keep her, like, status and, like, all of her servants, and she could, like, walk freely in the grounds. Like, she was in jail, but not in jail. She was just kind of, like, house arrested right now. But then Jane's dad, her bio dad, actually, was involved in rebellion. Oh, he did something kind of cool, okay. Was involved in the Wyatt Rebellion to try to overthrow Mary. Not to actually instill Jane as queen. That actually, I guess, was not the actual, like, plot of the Wyatt Rebellion. They just wanted to overthrow Mary. Like, they did not want her in power. Unfortunately, that did not go well for him. The rebellion was squashed, and most of them were either killed or exiled. Like, they were probably mostly killed. Now, let's get into the tail end of Jane's life here. Jane was actually not involved in the Wyatt Rebellion at all whatsoever. It just so happens her dad was, like, a big part of it. Now, Mary actually offered Jane and her husband, like, to spare their lives, in transaction for, converting to Catholicism. Now, Miss Jane, who, very smart, educated, lovely, intellectual, and extremely pious, no, I don't, no Catholicism. Like, diva, she's gonna kill you if you don't. Okay. So, because she didn't want to convert to Catholicism, Mary actually asked advice from the Privy's Council or whatever, because she was like, what do I do? Do I just, like, what do I do? And the council was like, kill her. And she was like, oh, okay. And so very reluctantly, Mary sent Jane and Guilford off for execution. Now, do I think that Mary wanted Jane to die? Absolutely not. I think her and Jane had this very strange relationship, and I do not think Mary wanted to kill Jane. I don't think that is what was occurring. Because it could have been anyone in Jane's place, and I think Mary knew that, and that Jane was kind of used as the scapegoat of these regent of men and things like that, trying to, like, hold power and things like that. And I think Mary, I think she had to understand a little bit of that. There's no way that she didn't. And I think they just had a very strange relationship of like cousins, and like I do not think she wanted Jane dead. I do not think that she, like, in her heart of hearts, wanted to kill her. That is beside the point. I am not being a Mary Tudor apologist right now. There is a reason why she is called Bloody Mary. Like, Mary the First, Bloody Mary. Like, there's a reason why she's called that. Mary didn't do awesome, you know, great things. Not being an apologist for that, but I think at the time, I don't think she wanted Jane dead. Okay? On February 12th, 1554, Lady Jane Grey was executed. Historically, from her final moments, she asked the executioner to dispatch her quickly, which was to do it very fast. Like, just she doesn't want to, you know. So he blindfolded her, and very notably, Jane felt around for the block, and she's like, I can't find it. What do I do? What do I do? I can't find, like, she's a 17-year-old girl getting, like, trying to, like, being anxious because she's about to be killed. Like, she's looking around for the execution block. She's blindfolded, can't see anything. What do I do? I can't find it. How do I, and somebody had to, like, you know, guide her to it. As her head was placed on the executioner's block, she said her final words as the axe fell. And the 17-year-old Queen, Lady Jane Grey, was dead. Jane was buried under the altar of the Chapel Royal in the Tower of London, and lying not far next to her were actually the other two beheaded Tudor queens, Queen Anne Boleyn and Queen Catherine Howard. People did not like that Mary killed Guilford and Jane. The people really did see them as innocents, but they were kind of made into martyrs, unfortunately. They really did not like that she killed Jane. They were super, super, like, kind of PO'd about it. And Jane is kind of seen as a martyr for Protestants of the time. And as historians, Lady Jane Grey's tale of her life has been seen as this very saddened tale of a political scapegoat who was used as a power pawn for the line of Tudor supremacy, and how they just kind of used young women, you know, kind of horrendously. What are some of your thoughts on the life story of Lady Jane Grey? Put it in the comments below. And a fun fact to keep the end of this video super light, my car is actually named after Lady Jane Grey. Lady Jane, my car that I've had for several years, is named after Lady Jane Grey, the 9-Day Queen. And that, my loves, is the end of this video. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to stick around because you just might learn something.